Now it shall come to pass, if I diligently obey the voice of the Lord my God, to observe carefully all your commandments which Moses commanded me today, that the Lord my God will set me high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon me and overtake me, because I obey the voice of the Lord my God. Blessed shall I be in the city, and blessed shall I be in the country. So starts the beginning of Deuteronomy 28. Blessed shall I be in the city, and blessed shall I be in the country. Finding that balance in life. Welcome to Alpha Male Podcast. Reach down, grab a hold, gird your loins, and get ready for another episode of Alpha Male Podcast, where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, with God Almighty at the center, made in His image, strong, dominant, and in control. And we don't apologize for that. Now, today's topic, let's talk about urban versus rural, city versus country. And there's many dichotomies, I think, that people use, culture, society uses to kind of rule over us and pit us against each other. Red versus blue, donkey versus elephant, both are ridiculous in my opinion. Doesn't it say you shall make no graven images, and bow down to them, nor serve them? Anyway, there's all kinds of dichotomies. There's a big dichotomy, city versus country. But I'm here to tell you that a brave man, a good man, should be able to live well anywhere. I certainly have my preference. I remember once when I was serving in the Army, write down an ideal job. I think I wrote down hermit. I very much prefer to be in the country. I plan on going on a ruck tonight. I have been doing pretty long stints out in the Bitterroot, Idaho, Montana wilderness areas. I really enjoy that. But I also really enjoy sitting down with my wife, go to a nice restaurant and sit down and try some of the local wine. Right? I can enjoy both those things. I have lived large stints in the city. If you know my bio, if you've heard it before, I didn't plug it into this one, but I was LAPD, right? I worked LAPD, which obviously is a giant metropolis. I worked some of the most urbanized and nastiest streets in this country, working some specialized assignments. Certainly wasn't my preference to live there, which is one of the reasons I left that job, but while I was there, I tried to make the most of it and learn as much as I can. I think a brave, good man should be able to live well anywhere. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. Likewise, I can go in a canoe and go on some of the most remote places in the country, where you could go for weeks, months, and never see a human being. I enjoy that too. I can wear a fancy 3-piece suit and a tie, and I can tie a tie, and I can sit in fancy boardrooms. I've mentioned in other episodes when I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. That also meant that I sat in on many corporate meetings for a multi-billion-dollar corporation and wore a suit and a tie and had to do politics, which, to be honest, I don't really like. But I could wear that fancy suit and sit in a fancy board meeting and drink their fancy free coffee and make small talk. Can do that too, especially if it meant getting my men the equipment and the policies that they needed to make people that weren't gunfighters kind of see the reasons why we needed to do the things that we did. If you don't think like law enforcement and gunfighting and things like that or politics, go, if you ever get the opportunity to be at like a party with generals or with police chiefs. It's pretty political. And as much as I wish I could just... And those are generally in big urban environments. One of the reasons I took that job, they asked me to be the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters after one of the largest mass shooting incidents in our country. And they asked me to head that up, to form that organization and write policies and procedures. And that meant living in another large metropolitan area. They asked me to do this a few days before I planned to ship out to Afghanistan on a contract. And I took that, not necessarily because I wanted to be in a big city, but because I thought that's where God wanted me to make a difference. If I could have that opportunity to make a difference, to serve in that way, then I should do it. And I had a good life in that city. Likewise, when I had gotten that up and running and off the ground, I resigned. In good standing. Not, I wasn't in trouble or anything. I resigned so that I could go be a professional big game hunter and guide, right? From making far less money. So I could be out in the wilderness. Literally sometimes eating raw venison. Like a savage. And I really liked that too. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. You should be able to do both. A good man, a brave man, should be able to do both and thrive in both. An abundant life. Jesus is our example. And Jesus oftentimes went into the city, because that's where people were, and he was here to save souls. That's where the souls were. And he also went out in the wilderness to be alone many, many times. It says he went out into the wilderness, depending on your translation, to a deserted place, to a wild place. He withdrew by himself to a mountain, to the wilderness. It says that many times in the Gospels. If Jesus needed to do that, if he needed to get some alone, if he needed some solitude and some being out in God's creation, I think that's something you should do as a man. And I don't think there should be this dichotomy between city people and rural people. I think as a good man, as an alpha male, not just as some random dude, this is not the beta male podcast. If you want to be an alpha male, you should be able to thrive in both of those environments. You can prefer one over the other, I definitely do. But when I'm in the city, I make the most of it. When I was in LA, I go to the beach and surf. I like going to the beach. It's one of the few things that I really enjoyed there. I really enjoyed the weather. The food was nice. When I'm out in the middle of nowhere with nobody around, I enjoy jumping in a really cold creek, skinny dipping to get clean out in the middle of the wilderness, living off grid. I'm off grid, living off grid right now. But I could shower and shave and put on a suit and sit in a fancy board meeting if I thought that it was going to help some other people to influence some kind of policy or something like that. I've certainly done my fair share of testifying in court. If I had to put on a suit and a tie and go testify in court as a expert witness to help save somebody I thought was innocent, I certainly would do that. And then I could take off that suit and tie, throw it in a trash bin and burn it because I have no desire to wear a tie. And I could go slay a beast in the wilderness and eat it. I don't fear either one of those things. And you shouldn't either as a man. You should seek to thrive in both environments. An abundant life shouldn't just mean an abundant life in your cubicle, in your little space. You should be able to do well anywhere as a man. You should be able to provide and protect anywhere as a man. I recently did an episode on the tactical divide. If you listen to Gunfighter Life, I do a lot of gun content as I have been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life, as you probably heard from me just mentioning very small parts of my bio. There's kind of this tactical divide, like you got your tactical AR, Glock 19 guys in one corner, and you have your hunting rifle, blued steel and walnut shotgun guys in the other. I love both those things. I can teach a good tactical training course. I can also go out in the wilderness and slay beasts as a professional big game hunter and guide. I've done both. I like both. You should be well versed at both. If you're really, really good at running an AR-15 and that's the only gun that you know, that gun is a pretty poor choice to put food on the table. It just is, right? Talk about surviving off the land as somebody who's done it. A big part of that is small game hunting. Not just killing it, but eating it and having something to eat. The AR-15 is not meant to take a mourning dove out of the air. And even if you could do it, there's not much left to eat. It's pretty underpowered for something like an elk. It's a poor choice for putting meat on the table. If that's the only gun you know how to run, I'd say you have a lopsided, skewed view of the way of the gun. Likewise, if you can run that shotgun out in the woods and routinely take game with an old single shot, single barreled, break open shotgun. You can take ducks and geese and snipe and deer with that old shotgun. Fantastic. But then you don't carry a handgun, you don't know how to run a handgun when you're in the city, because no matter how country you are nowadays, you're probably going to the grocery store at some point. And if you're a young man and into dating, that young lady is probably going to want some kind of social interaction at some point. You're going to have to go in the city. You're going to be able to protect her. You're going to be able to protect yourself. An example, my wife, she's from Central Florida. We recently were back there. She was visiting some family and friends. One of her friends was a professional DJ. She wanted me to go meet these friends. I love my wife. She doesn't ask me for much. And she puts up with a lot. Put it that way. She'll hop in a canoe with me when we go out in the wilderness in the backcountry for who knows how long. She asked me to go to this, and this is one of what I would call like the ironic country. It's Central Florida, so there's like 400 and some people per square mile. A lot of people with jacked up trucks that don't actually go off-road, and cowboy boots, even though they may have never ridden a horse. But anyway, that kind of place, and it was a club, whatever they call it, a honky-tonk. Very much an urban environment with a country theme. Anyway, she was meeting some friends there. Now I can still carry. I didn't lie to these people. They had a wand. They had all these security people. Well, I'm pretty familiar with urban operations. I'm pretty familiar with clandestine operations. I'm pretty familiar with undercover work. I was able to get in there with my gun and my knife, even though I had a wand and they were patting people down. And that's kind of an urban skill. I got in there with my gun and my knife, and I went down and sat with her friends. They also happened to be gun people, and they were lamenting that they had to leave their guns and stuff in the truck. And I said, well, I didn't leave mine in the truck. It's an urban firearm skill. They were all unarmed. And I would have to surmise that pretty much everybody in that place, except for me, was unarmed. Because they didn't have that skill. They didn't have that urban savvy. You might be great at shooting doves out of the air with a shotgun. That's a great skill to have. If you don't have that urban skill and you've gone with your lady to wherever she wants to go out to have a drink, and you don't have a gun, you've greatly diminished your ability to protect that young lady because you didn't have that urban skill. It's a balance. Be able to do both. Provide and protect. Blessed in the city and blessed in the country. Likewise, if you know exactly what tie goes with what suit and exactly what to say in a board meeting, but you don't know how to swim, right? I'd say you have a skewed specialization. Be able to do both. I think you ought to be able to kill a beast, butcher it, cook it on a fire. I also think you should be able to cook a nice meal for somebody that you love in a regular kitchen. One thing I don't have to talk about in the bio because it's not often relevant is, by God's grace, He's blessed me with a good talent for cooking. Oftentimes, people that have had my cooking, when we're at a big gathering, people will ask me to cook because they like my cooking. Whether it's at a hunting camp and I'm literally roasting, meat over a fire, or I take some nice buffalo heart, which I have done, and carve it up really nice and put some really fancy garnish on it and put it on a fancy cracker and serve it with wine at a fancy dinner party. And they really like it, and they find out it's buffalo heart. They're like, oh, it's really good. Yeah, you should be able to do both those things. Not those things specifically, but you should be able to do both, right? You should be able to go, for instance, catch a fish and cook it. Scale it, gut it, cook it on a fire. You should also be able to take a nice piece of salmon and carve it up, make some homemade Alfredo sauce, and serve some good salmon Alfredo to somebody because you care about them and you want to do something nice for them. And not necessarily salmon Alfredo, but you should be able to do those different kinds of skill sets. You should be able to do both. There is often, I think, again, that kind of divide, that disparity, people try and divide us between city and country. And people in the country will say that people in the city don't know how to do anything. And I don't think that that's true. They just know how to do different things. Yeah, they might not be able to buck hay. They might not know how to saddle a horse. But I guarantee if I take that small town farm kid and drop him off at 15 with a bunch of 15-year-old bangers in Compton, there's going to be a big learning curve there. There's a lot of stuff that they know to stay alive that he doesn't know. If you take the criminal part out of it, just stuff that they know to stay alive. Like, they could probably look and know that crime is afoot and say, hey, there's a drug deal going down in that alley. Probably should not go down that alley. Whereas that 15-year-old farm kid might just be whistling Dixie and walk down the alley. But again, you take that 15-year-old kid from Compton and drop him off on a farm and tell him to ride that horse. It's just different. And a good man should be able to do both. I can ride a horse. I can saddle a horse. I've also worked some of the nastiest streets in the country. I can spot and stalk and track down an animal in the wilderness. I can also track down a fugitive in a city. I've done both of those professionally. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. One of the things as a man I think that is important to be circumspect is self-diagnostic ability. I pray about this often when I am training in shooting. I try and practice every day. One of the things I pray for is self-diagnostic ability. You see, if you are pushing yourself to be better as a man, you should mess up at times. An easy analogy for this is shooting. If I'm pushing myself to be better in shooting, not just doing something easy, like shooting a silhouette target at 3 yards or something, but I'm pushing myself to the limit to be better, I'm going to miss. There's nothing wrong with missing. Missing is part of that if you're pushing yourself. But if I just miss, and I don't know why, if I don't know what I screwed up, then that miss was kind of useless. It was just a waste. But if I know what I messed up, my natural point of aim was off. My follow-through was atrocious. If I can fix those things and hit consistently, that miss was not a waste. That is self-diagnostic ability. And you can use it in the micro like that or in the macro. What in my life am I lacking in? For instance, and these are not all skills I think you should have to know, but there are probably some good skills. Do you know how to wear a suit? Do you know how to tie a tie? Do you know how to ride a horse? Do you know how to paddle a canoe? Do you know how to change out a spark plug? Do you know how to change your oil? Do you know how to change a tire? Can you navigate through wilderness? And I don't mean like on a well-established marked trail. I mean, can you go cross-country in the wilderness and not get severely injured and need to get rescued? Can you also navigate across a big city and not get mugged or shivved or end up as a missing person? Right? You should have both those skills. Can you run an AR-15 in an urban environment? Do you know CQB, close quarters battle stuff, both hand-to-hand and with a firearm? Likewise, can you put meat on the table, literally as a man? And pick one. Fishing, foraging, hunting. Can you do those things too? Foraging the right kind of food the right way. You might not think of it this way, but you go out in the wilderness. Many of the plants that look like they're good and look like they'd be delicious will straight up kill you. You might see a patch of nightshade growing with some stinging nettle. Now, stinging nettle doesn't look very appetizing, and in fact, it hurts really, really bad. It's called stinging nettle for a reason. But if you know how to harvest it, it's super nutritious. It's a superfood. That nightshade is deadly. It'll straight up kill you, but it looks delicious. It'll have beautiful purple or red berries that just look very appetizing, but it'll straight up kill you. Things at the grocery store might be more insidious. Do you know how to pick out good food at the grocery store? You should be able to pick it out in the wilderness and in the grocery store, right? A Twinkie may look appetizing, it may look appealing, but it'll straight up kill you. It may take longer. But, Twinkies, Oreos, Doritos, if that's your diet, you're killing yourself slowly, miserably. That's not proper human food, in my opinion. A good man should be able to do both. And a lot of people that tout themselves as country people that say they can hunt and fish and provide for themselves, a big chunk of their diet is junk food, especially, sadly, in the South. Look at the obesity rates in like Mississippi. RC Cola and moon pies is not a proper human diet, in my opinion. They might have that country savvy, those good old boys. They might be able to go routinely harvest deer. But the vast majority of the rest of their diet is straight up garbage because they lack that city savvy. They lack the city savvy of going to a big store and not just getting what looks shiny and smells good, but what's actually good for them. Walking around the outside of the grocery store where the fresh meat and the fresh vegetables and stuff like that are, instead of going to the middle where the Twinkies and the Ho-Hos and the Little Debbie stuff is. Catch a bass on topwater, which is something I really like, but they'll go catch this super nutritious fish and they'll throw it back and go drink a giant Mountain Dew and order pizza for dinner. It just kind of baffles the mind when you step back and look at it. Discerning proper, healthy food is important in both environments. How about resource management? It's good in both environments. It's good to be able to go look around your environment and figure out what makes good tinder to start a fire. Also, how to collect firewood, how to split firewood, how to manage your fire so that it lasts the proper amount of time, to know how much wood to have to gather, how much moss or dry grass to start the fire. That's resource management, and you should know that. Likewise, you could be great at building a fire in the wilderness, and you could get your paycheck on shiny new Babylonian baubles and widgets that you don't need. It's poor resource management. Likewise, you could be really good with stocks and bonds and all the city stuff and wise investing and not know how to build a fire, how to get water if it doesn't come out of the tap. That's not being blessed in both environments. Resource management. Don't get your whole paycheck and blow it on rims. Likewise, don't go out in the wilderness and collect a bunch of wet, rotten wood on the ground when there's dry wood, dead limbs hanging on trees. Resource management. It's a good skill for both. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. I was recently out in the Bitterroot, the wilderness, Montana, Idaho, up by, the Idaho-Montana Canadian border. Very wild, rugged place. I was out doing a multi-day backwoods excursion, the Bug Out Bag, which there should be an episode on. I don't know which one will come out first, but I did record some stuff on it, lessons learned. But I could literally see the thunderstorm rolling in. Even though it was hot and dry where I was at, I could see the thunderstorm rolling in. Not just hear it, I could see it. I could see it because I could see so far in the distance on the mountains. I could see the storm coming. And my shelter was a poncho. Oftentimes when I go out in the wilderness, I'll just make a poncho hooch. You don't have to know what that is, but it's a very rudimentary shelter. Able to get that shelter up in about 3 to 5 minutes because I know what I'm doing. I've done it before, but I could shelter from that storm. Likewise, I've lived in large metropolitan areas, and there's storms of different sorts that are deadly there, like rioting and civil unrest. I have seen that both foreign and domestic. I have seen riots and civil unrest where people have been killed. There are signs of those storms coming too. It's all good to be able to read the weather outside in the wilderness. It's good to be able to smell the rain coming. It's also good in a city to know when things are about to break, when there's a people storm coming, people behaving badly, when that tipping point is coming, when it's about to let loose. Both of those are important skills. I often in the beginning of the episode talk about being a man and strong, dominant, and in control. Do you know what God told Adam when he made him, when he formed him from the dust of the ground? Genesis 1. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and on every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Have dominion. Be a man. That's part of it. That was one of the first things God said. Have dominion. Be in control of your environment. Can you be an alpha male in both environments? In all environments? Because whether I like it or not, the vast majority of the population, especially in America and most of the Western world, which is where a lot of you guys listen from, it's urban. People live in cities. The vast majority of the population live in cities. You as a follower of Christ, go out to all the world and preach the gospel. Share the good news. All right, Jesus went into cities. Why? Because that's where the people were. He also withdrew into the wilderness to be alone with God, to be strengthened, to get that alone time, to get refocused. You should be able to do both. You should be able to go to a suburban party, to a barbecue, and talk about Jesus. I think it's also healthy to be able to go out into the wilderness with God and refocus and recenter and kind of wash off the filth of the world. And then again, when you're called to go and impact it for the better, for God, but having dominion in both environments. So maybe be circumspect. Where are you lacking? What can you do better? I'd like to humbly thank you. I've been pushing you guys to support the podcast. So I'm not going to mention any of that right now. I just want to thank you if you listen. If you think this will help somebody, share it. That's it. Just I appreciate you guys. I am humbled. I am going to attempt to recite Deuteronomy 28. Now it shall come to pass, if I diligently obey the voice of the Lord my God, to observe all these commandments which Moses commanded me today, that the Lord my God will set me high above all nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon me and overtake me, because I obey the voice of the Lord my God. Blessed shall I be in the city, and blessed shall I be in the country. Blessed shall be the fruit of my body, the produce of my ground, the increase of my herds, the increase of my cattle, and the offspring of my flocks. Blessed shall be my basket and my kneading bowl. Blessed shall I be when I come in, and blessed shall I be when I go out. The Lord will cause my enemies who rise against me to be defeated before my face. They shall come out against me one way and flee before me 7 ways. The Lord will command your blessings on me in my storehouses, and all to which I set my hand. And you will bless me in the land which the Lord my God is giving me. The Lord will establish me as a holy people unto yourself, just as you swore to me. If I heed the commandments of the Lord my God and walk in your ways, then all the people of the earth shall see that I am called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of me. And the Lord will grant me plenty of goods, in the fruit of my body, in the increase of my livestock, and the produce of my ground, in the land which the Lord swore to my fathers to give me. The Lord will open to me your good treasure, the heavens, to give rain to my land in season, and bless all the work of my hand. I shall lend to many nations, but I shall not borrow. and the Lord will make me the head and not the tail. I shall be above only, and not be beneath, if I heed the commandments of the Lord my God, which Moses commanded me today, and are careful to observe them. So I shall not turn aside from any of the words which Moses commanded me this day, to the right or to the left, to go after other gods and serve them. That's the first part of the chapter, Deuteronomy 28. Great blessings for obeying God. I believe in God. I believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Men, be blessed in the city and be blessed in the country. Believe in the blessings of God and have a blessed day.